The morning air hung heavy and still in Black Pine Wildlife Sanctuary. No birds sang. No leaves rustled. Just an unnatural, deafening silence that made the hairs on Ranger Aiden Cole's neck stand straight up. He'd patrolled these woods for 2 decades through every kind of danger. But this silence was different. Ominous. Then a single, sharp crack of breaking branches shattered the quiet. His head whipped toward the sound, hand instinctively reaching for his radio. Whatever was coming through those trees wasn't just passing through. It was coming for him. A visible shudder ran down Aiden's spine despite the morning sun warming his back. His experienced eyes scanned the dense pine forest, noticing how the usual animal sounds had completely vanished. Then he saw him Zuberi, the massive 400-pound silverback gorilla who normally kept to himself, standing rigid as a statue just 30 yards away. But it wasn't the gorilla's size that froze Aiden in place. It was the look in those deep, intelligent eyes. Not aggression, not curiosity, urgency. Without warning, Zuberi turned and disappeared into the misty wetlands, pausing just once to glance back. The message was clear: follow me. Now, Aiden had seen gorillas display all kinds of behavior over the years. Dominance displays, playful antics, even grief. But what Zuberi did next defied all expectations. The mighty silverback, who could snap thick branches with his bare hands, made a sound Aiden had never heard from a gorilla before. A soft, pleading whimper deep in his throat. Zuberi's dark eyes locked onto Aiden's with startling intensity, then darted back toward the marshy wetlands. He repeated this several times, his massive chest rising and falling rapidly. The normally proud creature was begging for what Aiden didn't know yet, but that desperate look in Zuberi's eyes told him whatever it was, it couldn't wait. Aiden's boots sank into the thick, sucking mud of the southern wetlands as he struggled to keep up with Zuberi's surprisingly quick movements. The stench of rotting vegetation and iron-rich water filled his nostrils. Then, through the swaying cattails, he saw it a massive, tawny shape collapsed in the muck. As he drew closer, his stomach lurched. Caesar, the mature male lion who disappeared from the sanctuary months ago, lay motionless, his once glorious mane matted with blood and filth. A rusted, vicious metal snare had bitten deep into his hind leg. The wound so infected the surrounding flesh had turned black. The lion's sides barely moved with each labored breath. But when those golden eyes slowly opened and met Aiden's, they held not fear, but something far more heartbreaking: recognition and relief. The scene before Aiden was nothing short of horrific. Caesar, who had once been the proudest, strongest lion in Black Pine, now lay broken in the mud, his breathing shallow and ragged. The poacher's snare had sawed through muscle and tendon down to the bone, the wound oozing pus and blood. Flies swarmed around the injury, their buzzing the only sound in the heavy air. What shocked Aiden most wasn't the injury itself, but what happened next. Zuberi, the massive silverback, carefully crouched beside the dying lion and did something that defied nature. He gently placed one enormous, leathery hand on Caesar's head in what could only be described as a comforting gesture. The lion didn't flinch or growl. Instead, he let out the softest, most pitiful whimper Aiden had ever heard from a big cat. In that moment, the ranger realized with startling clarity, this wasn't just about saving a life. It was about honoring a bond that shouldn't exist, but somehow did. The coppery scent of blood filled the air as dark red liquid continued to seep from Caesar's ruined leg, staining the marsh water crimson. Each of the lion's labored breaths sent a fresh trickle of blood running down his matted fur. His once bright golden eyes, now clouded with pain, locked onto Aiden's with an intensity that spoke volumes. Not the wild panic of a cornered animal, but the quiet plea of a creature who knew death was near. Then, something extraordinary happened. Zuberi, the massive silverback, slowly lowered his head until his forehead touched Caesar's, emitting a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through the still air. The lion's tail gave the faintest twitch in response, and for the first time since finding him, Aiden saw something flicker in those pain-glazed eyes: recognition, memory, and most astonishing of all, trust. In all his years working with wildlife, Aiden had never witnessed anything like what happened next. Zuberi, the 400-pound silverback gorilla who could easily kill with his bare hands, gently pressed his massive, wrinkled forehead against Caesar's bloodied mane. The lion, who should have reacted with instinctive fear to such close contact from a natural competitor, instead leaned into the touch with what could only be described as gratitude. Their breaths mingled in the cold morning air as Dr. Alex Carter came crashing through the reeds, medical kit in hand. The young vet froze mid-step, her professional composure crumbling for just a moment at the impossible scene before her. "My God," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They know each other." And in that moment, Aiden understood. This wasn't just about saving a life. It was about reuniting what time and circumstance had torn apart. Dr. Alex Carter's normally steady surgeon's hands trembled slightly as she assessed Caesar's injuries. The snare had cut so deep it had nearly severed the major artery in his hind leg. "We need to sedate him to remove this," she said, her voice tight with controlled panic. "But if we move him wrong, he'll bleed out right here in this mud." The vet's eyes darted between the fading lion and the watchful gorilla who hadn't left his side. Zuberi's dark, intelligent eyes seemed to understand every word as he placed a protective hand on Caesar's shoulder. Aiden watched in awe as the massive silverback actually nodded at Alex, as if giving permission. With a deep breath, the vet loaded the tranquilizer dart, her hands finally steadying. "Okay, big guy," she whispered, more to Zuberi than the lion. "Let's save your friend." The dart found its mark with a soft thunk, delivering its life-saving cocktail into Caesar's bloodstream. As the drugs took effect, the lion's breathing became even shallower, his massive chest rising and falling with increasing difficulty. The heart monitor Alex had attached beeped erratically, each weak pulse a knife to Aiden's heart. Zuberi remained motionless beside his fallen friend, his dark eyes never leaving Caesar's face. Then, just as hope seemed lost, the gorilla did something extraordinary. He began making a deep, rhythmic rumbling sound in his chest, almost like a lullaby. Whether by coincidence or something far more profound, Caesar's heartbeat began to steady in time with Zuberi's comforting vibrations. Alex's eyes widened in disbelief as the monitor's beeps grew stronger. "That's impossible," she breathed. But there it was, proof that sometimes the strongest medicine isn't found in any vial or syringe. The old, crescent-shaped scar on Caesar's shoulder told a story few would believe. Aiden's calloused fingers traced the faded mark gently as realization dawned. 12 years ago, before either animal had reached maturity, a curious lion cub and an orphaned baby gorilla had been temporary neighbors at Black Pine. Separated by a chain-link fence, they'd spent hours playing paw-to-hand through the metal links, forming a bond that defied nature. Now, as Caesar's paw twitched weakly in unconsciousness, brushing against Zuberi's massive fingers, it was clear he remembered. The gorilla responded with a soft huff of breath, nuzzling the lion's ear with a tenderness reserved only for family. Aiden felt something wet on his cheeks and realized he was crying. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a homecoming generations in the making, proving that love and loyalty can transcend even the deepest divides of the natural world. The dusty pages of Black Pine's archival logbook crackled as Aiden turned them, his fingers stopping at a faded photograph. There, behind chain-link fencing, a tiny lion cub pressed its nose against the bars while a young gorilla reached through with careful fingers. The date stamp read 12 years earlier. Dr. Alex's breath caught as she pointed to the names in the margin: Caesar and Zuberi, handwritten with a caretaker's affection. The pieces fell together with heartbreaking clarity. This wasn't random mercy. This was destiny calling in an old debt of friendship. The black and white security footage showed what words couldn't capture. a scrawny lion cub with oversized paws batting playfully at a gorilla infant's fingers through the fencing. Young Zuberi, then barely knee-high to the keepers, would mimic Caesar's movements with surprising grace. They'd spent afternoons this way, the barrier between them meaningless to their innocent hearts, until the day wildlife officials decided lions and gorillas couldn't be neighbors. The separation had been clinical, efficient, and utterly devastating to watch in those final frames where both animals pressed against their respective fences, calling for a friend who never came back. Tracking data from Caesar's old collar told an epic story. After being released into the wild preserve, the young lion had inexplicably traveled nearly 80 miles off his normal territory, through dense forest, across rocky cliffs, even swimming a treacherous river, all while evading poachers and rival prides. Now, seeing him broken in the mud, Aiden understood. Every scar, every mile, every near-death experience had led Caesar here, not by chance, not for survival, but because somewhere in that noble lion's heart, he remembered one truth. If he was going to die, it would be near the only family he'd ever known. The medical reports fluttered from Aiden's trembling hands, white pages scattering across the observation room floor. All the data, the charts, the scientific explanations, none of it mattered now. What pulsed through that recovery room was something no textbook could define. Through the glass, he watched Zuberi carefully groom Caesar's matted mane, the lion responding with weak but deliberate headbutts to the gorilla's chest. Dr. Alex wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I went to 8 years of veterinary school," she whispered, "and nothing prepared me for this." Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, blanketing Black Pine in hushed reverence for a bond that refused to be broken. Camera crews massed at Black Pine's gates like vultures, drawn by leaked footage of the impossible friendship. But inside the quarantine wing, a more urgent battle raged. Caesar's infected leg required a risky second surgery, and Zuberi hadn't eaten in 3 days, his massive frame visibly weakening as he kept vigil. Aiden pressed his forehead against the cool observation glass, watching the gorilla gently adjust the blanket over the sleeping lion. The heart monitor's steady beep was the only sound in the room. Somewhere beyond these walls, the world waited for a miracle. But here, in this quiet space between breaths, 2 souls were fighting their hardest war yet, not for fame, not for spectacle, but for one more day together. The gunfire cracked through the pre-dawn stillness like thunder, sending a murder of crows exploding from the pines. Aiden knew that sound. It wasn't Hunter's. It was Jax Mercer's modified rifle, the same one that had left Caesar crippled. Security feeds showed 2 figures cutting through the perimeter fence near the hybrid zone. Zuberi heard it too. The silverback's head snapped up, nostrils flaring as he positioned himself between the door and Caesar's recovery cage. A low, dangerous rumble built in his chest, a sound Aiden had never heard from the gentle giant before. This wasn't just protection. This was a promise written in blood. No one touches him again. The ground trembled as Zuberi's challenge roar split the air, a primal declaration that echoed through Black Pine's valleys. In his recovery pen, Caesar stirred weakly, his own raspy growl joining the chorus despite his injuries. Aiden watched in awe as the gorilla tore a thick branch from a nearby oak, wielding it like a club. Every scar on Zuberi's body seemed to pulse with remembered pain. The poacher's traps, the years apart, the near loss of his oldest friend. Tonight, the forest itself held its breath as 2 legends prepared to stand together one last time. Not as captives. Blood soaked through the bandages as Caesar hauled himself upright, his remaining good legs shaking with effort. The lion's golden eyes burned with defiant fury, his lips peeling back from ivory fangs as Jax Mercer stepped into the clearing. Zuberi moved like shadow beside him. 2 apex predators turned guardians of their own fragile peace. Caesar's thunderous snarl carried the weight of every animal who'd ever fallen to human greed. In that moment, The wounded lion wasn't just fighting for his life. He was the voice of the voiceless, the embodiment of nature's righteous wrath. And he wasn't alone anymore. The trees erupted with movement as Zubari's entire family group answered his call. Females, juveniles, even the elderly beta male who rarely left the feeding platform. They came not as individual animals, but as a united front, their collective fury shaking the earth. Jax Mercer's sneer faltered as 20 gorillas materialized from the darkness, beating their chests in synchronized threat. But the true terror came when Caesar's ragged roar joined the cacophony. The poachers' rifles wavered. No paycheck was worth this. With a final, desperate shot that went wide, they turned and ran, swallowed by the vengeful night. The gunshot's echo faded into an eerie quiet. Smoke curled from where the bullet had grazed an ancient oak just inches from Zubari's head. Caesar lay panting in the dirt, his bandages dark with fresh blood. But as Aiden and the rangers arrived with flashlights, they found the silverback gently cradling the lion's head in his lap, making soft, soothing noises no gorilla should know how to make for a lion. The message was clear even without words. They'd won the battle. But the war had taken its toll. As dawn's first light filtered through the bullet-scarred trees, two kings sat together in exhausted silence, their foreheads touching in a wordless vow whatever came next, they'd face it together. The first light of dawn painted the sanctuary in gold as Zubari lumbered to his usual spot by Caesar's recovery pen. Rain or shine, the massive silverback arrived before the keepers, sitting patiently with his back against the fencing. Inside, Caesar would lift his head at the familiar footsteps, his tail giving a weak but unmistakable thump against the straw. Dr. Alex often found them like this, foreheads nearly touching through the chain links, breathing in sync. No food could lure Zubari away. No enrichment activity held his interest like these quiet moments. The sanctuary staff began setting his breakfast bowl right there, knowing the gorilla wouldn't move until Caesar had eaten first. The day Caesar took his first unaided steps, the entire staff held their breath. The lion's ruined leg trembled violently with each movement, fresh blood beading on the bandages. But his eyes never left Zubari, waiting just beyond the barrier. When he finally reached the fence, the exhausted lion collapsed against it with a huff, his massive head coming to rest exactly where the gorilla's hand pressed from the other side. Aiden swore he saw Zubari's dark eyes glisten in the morning light as the gorilla began making soft, rumbling sounds deep in his chest. Caesar responded with a noise no lion manual had ever documented, a purr-like vibration that made the fencing hum. The contrast between them should have been comical. A 500-pound silverback gorilla sitting cross-legged like a Buddha, carefully grooming a lion's mane with his dexterous fingers. Caesar, though still gaunt from his ordeal, leaned into the attention like an overgrown house cat, occasionally licking Zubari's knuckles with his rough tongue. The wounds on both animals told their brutal history. Zubari's missing fingertip from an old trap, Caesar's jagged scars from the snare. Yet here, in this sun-dappled corner of black pine, they moved with a gentleness that silenced every skeptical scientist. Dr. Alex lowered her clipboard, whispering what everyone was thinking. They're not just healing each other's bodies, they're healing each other's souls. Aiden's coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago, but he couldn't tear himself away from the observation window. On the monitors, Caesar was attempting to run for the first time. His gait lopsided but determined, Zubari jogging alongside the fencing with surprising grace. When the lion stumbled, the gorilla reached through the barrier to steady him. When Zubari paused to rest his aging joints, Caesar mirrored him, lying down exactly parallel to his friend. The ranger's radio crackled with another media request, but he ignored it. Some miracles couldn't be explained in sound bites. Not this bond forged in childhood, tested by cruelty, and resurrected against all odds. He reached for his worn journal, scribbling just 4 words. Love needs no translation. The emails piled up, National Geographic, BBC, even Oprah's producers. Black Pine servers crashed twice from the viral footage. But in quarantine, a more pressing battle raged. Caesar's latest blood work showed alarming infection levels, while Zubri refused to eat unless hand-fed near the lion's enclosure. At 2 a.m., Aiden found Dr. Alex asleep at her desk, her fingers still curled around a syringe. On the monitors, the two animals lay back-to-back through the fencing, their synchronized breathing the only calm in the storm. The ranger draped his jacket over the exhausted vet. Let the world clamor. Tonight, the real work happened in these quiet hours, where the only audience that mattered was a gorilla counting each of his lion's breaths. The gunfire came at twilight, 3 rapid shots that sent birds screaming into the crimson sky. Security cameras showed Jax Mercer's familiar camouflage jacket near the hybrid zone, a new accomplice carrying bolt cutters. But this time, the poachers weren't hunting. They were here for revenge. Aiden's blood ran cold as the feed showed them heading straight for Caesar's enclosure. What he saw next defied belief. Zubri, normally so gentle, had torn a sapling from the earth and stood blocking the path like a furry colossus. Behind him, Caesar's eyes glowed in the darkness, not with fear, but with cold, calculated fury. The message was clear. Come any closer, and you'll face both of us. The silverback's warning roar shattered windows in the nearby education center. Ancient instincts took over as Zubri beat his chest with a sound like war drums, his black fur standing on end to make him appear twice his size. But the true terror came when Caesar joined in, his deep, guttural roars blending with the gorillas in a primal symphony of protection. Trees trembled as Zubri's entire troop answered the call, materializing from the forest like shadows. Jax Mercer's face went sheet white when he realized his mistake. He hadn't just angered a gorilla. He'd awakened an army. Blood seeped through Caesar's bandages as he forced himself upright, his muscles quivering with effort. The lion's lips curled back from dagger-like fangs, a growl building in his chest that vibrated the very ground. Zubri positioned himself shoulder to shoulder with his old friend, the two forming an impenetrable wall of fur and fury. When the poachers raised their rifles, Caesar did something unimaginable. He stepped in front of Zubri, taking the defensive position normally reserved for a pride male protecting his family. In that heartbeat, roles reversed, predator became protector, and a lion declared to the world that this gorilla was worth dying for. The forest erupted in chaos as Zubri's family descended like a living avalanche. Females charged from the left flank, juveniles pelt the poachers with rocks from the trees, while the elder males formed a protective circle around Caesar. Jax Mercer's accomplice turned and ran, but the ringleader stood frozen as Zubri advanced, not with blind rage, but terrifying precision. The silverback's fist shattered a rifle stock like kindling, his intelligent eyes burning with something beyond animal instinct. This wasn't just defense. This was justice. And when Caesar's thunderous roar joined the cacophony, the last poacher finally broke, stumbling backward into the waiting arms of sanctuary security. The gunshot's deafening crack was followed by a metallic ping as the bullet grazed the enclosure fencing, sending up a shower of sparks. Caesar moved faster than his injuries should allow, placing himself between Zubri and the gun. Time seemed to freeze as the lion's amber eyes met the gorilla's, a lifetime of shared memories passing in that glance. Then, impossibly, the second shot never came. The poacher's hands shook too violently to aim. As sanctuary vehicles screeched into the clearing, the only sound was Zubri's keening whimper as he gathered the trembling lion against his chest, fingers probing for wounds. The message was clear to all witnesses. These two would rather die together than live apart again. The shaky cell phone footage spread like wildfire, Zubri shielding Caesar with his own body as gunfire rang out. By noon, Black Pine's phones rang non-stop with teary-eyed offers of donations, volunteers, even marriage proposals for the world's most heroic gorilla. But in the medical bay, Caesar's breathing remained labored, His wounds reopened during the confrontation. Dr. Alex worked tirelessly as Zubri watched through the glass, his massive palms leaving smudge marks from constant pressing. The sanctuary director paced nearby, muttering about ethical dilemmas and public expectations. Outside, news helicopters circled like buzzards, waiting to see whether this love story would have a happy ending or become a tragedy that broke the internet's heart. Dr. Naomi Pierce's normally steady surgical hands shook as she reviewed the latest scans. The bullet had missed Caesar's vital organs by millimeters, but infection raged through his weakened system. Through the observation window, Zubri sat motionless, refusing food, water, even the treats he usually loved. Medically, they're different species, Naomi whispered to Aiden. But look at them. The lion's eyes followed the gorilla's every movement, even in his drugged stupor. When Zubri made a soft hooting sound, Caesar's tail twitched weakly in response. The vet wiped her eyes. That's not instinct. I don't even have a word for what that is. Hashtag gorilla and lion love trended worldwide, spawning memes, fan art, even a Saturday Night Live sketch. But behind closed doors, the sanctuary staff faced a grim reality. Caesar's blood work showed alarming numbers, and Zubri's refusal to eat was weakening his aging body. Aiden scrolled through tearful comments. They can't be separated. This proves love conquers all. While listening to the director's grim prognosis, we may need to prepare for. The sentence hung unfinished as a crash came from the recovery room. Both men turned to see Zubri, who'd somehow opened the interior gate, now cradling Caesar's head in his lap and gently picking leaves from his mane. The director's clipboard clattered to the floor. Or, we try something radical. Moonlight silvered Zubri's fur as he lay pressed against Caesar's outdoor run, one arm extended through the bars to rest on the lion's flank. The gorilla hadn't taken his eyes off his friend since the shooting, not even to sleep. Now, as medical equipment beeped inside, Zubri's deep, even breaths synchronized with Caesar's, as if willing his own strength into the injured cat. Night staff reported hearing the silverback make soft vocalizations unlike any in gorilla records, a cross between a hum and a purr. When questioned, the head keeper just shook his head. Caesar's voice returned first as a raspy wheeze, then grew into weak but recognizable chuffs and grunts. What stunned staff wasn't that the lion vocalized, but that Zubri responded in kind, creating a bizarre cross-species dialogue. The gorilla would tilt his head at certain sounds, responding with gentle hoots or chest taps that made Caesar's ears perk up. During one late-night observation, Dr. Alex witnessed Zubri bring a handful of special berries to the fence, the same medicinal variety wild gorillas use for sick troop members. When Caesar licked them from his friend's palm, the vet didn't reach for her notebook. Some miracles were meant to be experienced, not explained. The conference room buzzed with heated debate. It's unprecedented. The liability alone. What if the lion regresses? Aiden waited until all arguments were spent before standing slowly. He placed 2 photos on the table. One of Zubri listlessly staring at the wall during their forced separation years ago. Another of him grooming Caesar just yesterday. His voice broke only once. We took an oath to do what's best for these animals, not what's easiest for us. The vote passed by 1 margin. As the director announced the decision, we're creating a shared habitat. Cheers erupted down the hall where staff had been eavesdropping. Nobody noticed Zubri watching from the window, his dark eyes suspiciously bright. Aiden's ultimatum hung in the air as the board members exchanged glances. The head vet supported him, as did the entire keeper staff. Even the security team threatened to quit if the pair were separated. Outside, Zubri demonstrated his own form of protest, refusing to enter his night quarters until Caesar was wheeled nearby in his recovery crate. The old gorilla's stubbornness would have been comical if not for the heartbreaking context. When staff tried to lead him away, Zubri signed hurt and friend in Gorilla ASL, a language he hadn't used in years. The message was clear to everyone: where Caesar went, he would follow, even if that meant leaving Black Pine forever. Construction crews worked around the clock to transform 5 acres of forest into a revolutionary shared habitat. Elevated platforms for Zuberi to rest his aging joints. Soft sand patches to cushion Caesar's bad leg. Even a heated cave for winter months. The finishing touch came from an unexpected source. Local Native American elders gifted sacred tobacco to bury at the entrance, blessing this place where different spirits walk as one. On moving day, staff held their breath as the gates between enclosures finally slid open. For 10 heart-stopping minutes, neither animal moved. Then Zuberi extended one knuckle toward Caesar. The lion's answering headbutt sent staff scrambling for tissues. Some bonds, it seemed, didn't need cages. Sunlight streamed through the hybrid zone's trees as the final barrier lifted. Caesar limped forward, then suddenly veered left toward a cluster of wildflowers. The staff tensed. Was he disoriented? In pain? Then the lion began carefully plucking blossoms with his teeth, carrying them to where Zuberi sat watching. One by one, Caesar dropped the flowers at the gorilla's feet before collapsing beside him with an exhausted huff. Even the hardest biologists in the room swallowed lumps in their throats. In all recorded history, no lion had ever presented a gift to another species. Until today. Until Caesar. Until this moment that redefined what love looked like in the animal kingdom. The old silverback studied the open gate for a long moment, his intelligent eyes missing nothing: the unfamiliar terrain, the watching humans, the way Caesar's ears flicked with nervous excitement. Then, with the dignity of a king reclaiming his throne, Zuberi crossed the threshold. Not with a triumphant chest beat or roar, but with something far more profound. He reached back and took Caesar's scruff gently in his teeth, the way gorillas guide their young. Together, step by limping step, they vanished into the dappled sunlight of their new world. Aiden's radio crackled with a reporter's question. Are they really going to live together now? The ranger watched 2 shadows merge beneath the pines and smiled for the first time in weeks. Sweetheart, they've been living together in their hearts for 12 years. The morning mist swallowed them whole, Zuberi's broad silverback and Caesar's limping golden form merging with the forest shadows. The staff stood frozen, straining to hear any sign of trouble. Then, a sound. Not a roar or a hoot, but something entirely new. A harmonic blend of gorilla hum and lion purr resonating through the trees. Dr. Alex bent to examine what they'd left at the gate. 2 perfect paw prints side by side in the fresh mud, and between them, a single white wildflower, the kind Caesar had gifted days before. Aiden pocketed the blossom with trembling fingers. Some goodbyes weren't endings at all. The worn leather journal fell open to a water-stained page dated the day of release. Aiden's precise handwriting detailed everything: the medical stats, the GPS coordinates, the official protocol. But at the bottom, the ink blurred into something far more personal. Today I learned love isn't something we measure in species or logic. It's the quiet moments. How Zuberi still picks burrs from Caesar's mane even though the lion could do it himself. How Caesar always leaves the juiciest meat for his friend. 12 years apart couldn't kill it. Poachers couldn't shoot it. Maybe nothing can. The entry ended with a single dried flower taped to the page. Tourists still asked about them, of course. Children pressed their noses to the hybrid zone's viewing glass, hoping for a glimpse. But the sanctuary staff simply smiled and pointed to the plaque installed where the old enclosures once stood. Here began the extraordinary journey of Zuberi and Caesar, who taught us that family isn't always the one you're born to, but the one you choose. In the gift shop, the stuffed lion and gorilla set remained the best-selling item, though no one had the heart to mention the odd phenomenon. Every single paired toy ended up cuddled together on some child's shelf, just like the originals in the wild. The forest knew before the humans did. A hush fell over Black Pine one autumn morning. No birdsong, no chattering squirrels. Aiden, now gray at the temples, felt the familiar chill down his spine. He followed the trail of crushed ferns to a sunlit clearing, and there stood Zuberi, alone. The silverback's fur had whitened with age, his movements slower, but his eyes still held that same quiet wisdom. When the old gorilla extended his hand, Aiden saw what he carried. A single frayed tuft of golden fur. No words were needed. The ranger's tears watered the earth as Zuberi turned to leave, pausing just once to glance back at his oldest human friend. Some losses even time couldn't heal. If you walk Black Pine's trails early enough, when the mist still clings to the cattails, you might hear it. An echo of something that defies explanation. A harmony of deep gorilla hoots and rumbling lion chuffs carrying on the wind. The staff will tell you it's just your imagination. But notice how they never walk those paths alone. How the hybrid zone's wildflowers bloom unnaturally bright. How the paired memorial stones, one carved with paw prints, the other with knuckle drags, always seem warm to the touch, even in winter. Science has no name for what happened here. But love has 1,000. It hung framed in the visitor center, slightly blurred from movement. Zuberi sitting against their favorite oak, Caesar's head resting on his lap. The lion's eyes were closed in contentment, the gorilla's fingers frozen mid-grooming. But what made visitors catch their breath wasn't the animals. It was the date stamp. October 15th, the same day 12 years prior, when a baby lion cub first touched fingers with a gorilla infant through a fence. The photographer swore he hadn't planned it. Just like no one could explain why the digital file always showed 99% battery life, no matter how many viewed it. Aiden would only smile when asked. Some stories, he'd say, refuse to end. New interns often reported the same strange experience. Passing the old hybrid zone at twilight and seeing two shadows moving just beyond the tree line. When they'd blink, the shapes would vanish. But the air would smell inexplicably of warm fur and wild mint. Season keepers stopped investigating long ago. They simply left an extra portion of fruit by the fence each evening, and a fresh-cut haunch of meat. Both always disappeared by morning, though the cameras never showed how. The head vet had a theory. Love that strong? It doesn't just vanish. It finds a way to stay. October 15th dawned like any other day at Black Pine, except for one uncanny detail. Without fail, a pristine white wildflower would appear between the memorial stones. No footprints led to it. No animal had been seen placing it. Yet there it sat each year, dew still fresh on its petals. The staff stopped debating how it got there after the head gardener set up motion cameras, only to review footage showing the flower materializing at exactly 6:07 a.m., the documented time of their first meeting 12 years prior. Some mysteries, they decided, were better left unsolved. Years turned to decades. Aiden retired. Dr. Alex published her groundbreaking work on cross-species bonding. And then, one ordinary Tuesday, a call came from a wildlife reserve halfway across the country. They'd rescued an orphaned wolf pup and chimpanzee found curled together in a storm drain. When the staff tried to separate them, both had refused to eat. The sanctuary director sighed, already reaching for his Black Pine files. Tell me, he asked wearily, does the chimp know sign language? Because once, just once, the world had witnessed the impossible. And now they knew to look for it. So if you ever find yourself walking through Black Pine as morning light filters through the pines, pause, listen closely. That rustling in the underbrush might just be the wind. That warmth on your skin when no sun shines, probably your imagination. And that sound, so faint you feel it more than hear it, of contented rumbling and purring in perfect harmony, well, that's between you and whatever magic still lingers in these woods. Just know this, every caretaker here has a story about the day they stopped believing in coincidences and started believing in something far more wonderful. The rest is legend.